Welcome to Media in the Making, a podcast where we look at the evolution of media from 1600 all the way to present day. In this podcast series, we ask, how have different forms of media evolved and changed culture? Media in the Making, where media and culture are always changing. Now, let's take a step back in time. Today, we are talking about how radio affected jazz. But first, imagine a world without radio. How would music be spread around from person to person? I asked this question because radio was a great way to spread various types of music such as jazz, and still is a very effective tool to find new pieces of music today. Hello, this is Logan Kylander, and you are currently listening to 91.5 The Eagle. Today, we are going to discuss the evolution of jazz and how the evolution of the radio affected jazz. First, we are going to look into the evolution of the radio. Radio was first invented in 1906 as a means of communication in the First World War, which is from older techniques such as smoke signals, Morse code, or even letters sent by foot. Radios allowed for signals to be transferred clearly from one station to another without the need for risky or unreliable methods. Even though all this sounds nice, radios had one major flaw on the battlefield, getting damaged, which happened quite frequently. Landmines, tank shells, and bad weather would leave radio lines damaged, meaning clear and precise forms of communication were rather uncommon compared to radio communication of the modern day. The first civilian radio broadcasting was called KDKA. The first time it aired was April 11th, 1921 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was on that day they commentated on a football game and a boxing match. Jazz, on the other hand, doesn't have a specific date for when it was invented. All we know that it was invented in the early 20th century. It started specifically in New Orleans, and it had very diverse styles mixed into it, such as African Caribbean, French, Italian, German, Mexican, and American Indian influences. Jazz was just a mixture of dances, but eventually instruments were added, such as the saxophone and the piano. Radio had a very positive impact on jazz. You may ask why it had such a positive impact on jazz. Well, it's because the radio provided an outlet for people who have listened to jazz, enjoy it, and experience it for the first time. So they got to hear some of the most popular jazz musicians, such as Bessie Smith or Louis Armstrong. Eventually, people wanted to listen to these phenomenal artists outside the radio, so they bought their albums, which millions of people in America did. Just to give you an idea how popular jazz was with Americans, Bessie Smith's first album sold 2 million copies. Just think about that. The radio helped her with her success due to the fact that people who usually didn't listen to jazz got to appreciate her music across the country. In other words, the radio helped her reach a wider audience than she normally would in person. The Eagle. We hope you have a good rest of your day. Media in the Making is brought to you by WJHS 91.5 and the Eagle Tech Academy media classes. Media in the Making, teaching you about the evolution of media throughout history and its effects on culture. For more from the students, more podcasting series are on the 91.5 website, WJHS915.org. Thank you for joining us.
To all my Gen Z listeners out there, do you remember your first smartphone? Good times, right? But this time, come with me to a time where smartphones were not a thing, just a thought. My name is Kellen Ferguson, your host that's taking some of you down memory lane. while to others, bringing you to a world where smartphones never existed. You're listening to WJHS 91.5 The Eagle. Welcome to Media in the Making, a podcast where we look at the evolution of media from 1600 all the way to present day. In this podcast series, we ask, how have different forms of media evolved and changed culture? Media in the Making, where media and culture are always changing. Now, let's take a step back in time.
Hey, てるやん。
じいちゃん、それ携帯。カメラ持たなきゃ。
おじいちゃん、とうとう。
息子よ、時代についてこい。これはデジタルカメラだ。
携帯にカメラがついた。J フォン。
信行にも彼女ができたか。じゃあ俺もユリへ。行くぞー。
裏で撮って表で送る JSH04。
すげえおじいちゃん。
J フォン。
Coming back to where smartphones were just a thought. Close your eyes and imagine coming to the early 2000s. How about 2000? Now, to some of the Gen Z listeners out there, you can't imagine being in the 2000s. Well, just let old Ferguson here remind you that in 2000, think of zero smartphones and try to think of bulky mobile phones. So now, dearest listeners, now you know what the 2000s was like. One of the more popular mobile phones in the 2000s was the Nokia 3310. It was simple. A mobile phone that allowed the user to text and call friends, family, and essentially everyone. At the time, the Nokia 3310 was a fantastic mobile phone to use. Until it wasn't. The Nokia lacked something. And that something, dearest listeners, was a built-in camera. Cameras and mobile phones were separate. If you wanted to take a simple picture, you had to bring a camera with you. That changed on November 1st, 2000 by the Sharp Corporation. Now, that's a special date because, fellow listeners, that's when the JSH04 was invented. And now you might ask, what's the JSH04? That's a good question. Well, it's simply a mobile phone with a camera. Mind blown. The JSH04 dimensions were 127 by 39 by 17 millimeters, to which that's essentially the size of a king-size candy bar. The JSH04 was a taller mobile phone than most. However, at the time, that was quite simple. But what exactly made the JSH04 beat its competition? Even further, how did the JSH04 beat the Nokia's 3310? It was simply the technology installed into the JSH04's mechanics, to which that's the camera. It was convenient enough that people could have a mobile phone and a camera combined to both take pictures and send them to others. You didn't have to carry a mobile phone and a camera separately, to which created a path for other companies to walk in. Now, at the time, backwards-facing pictures were quite popular. In general, what the JSH04 offered in regards to both mobile phone and camera was mind-blowing. People at the time never would have thought of a combination like that. Which leads us to the JSH04 affecting culture as we know it. More well-known companies that created mobile phones took the idea of a mobile phone with a camera and created such models. Of course, these were a success. If you must know, the JSH04 never reached the States. In fact, the only country where the JSH04 was accessible was Japan. So, with the knowledge of knowing that the JSH04 never reached the other countries, companies easily took an idea and made much more profit than the Sharp Corporation. Now, if you really think about it, the JSH-04 essentially invented the selfie. Yes, as pause. I know. It didn't actually invent the selfie. But truly think about it. Without a camera phone, would we still have separate phones and cameras? For the gist, the reason why selfies were a thing was because of a phone, which included a camera, was capable of taking both front and backwards pictures. But without a phone that allowed taking pictures, would the selfie still be a thing? Would the selfie be this new craze that everyone wants to get in on? Would this selfie be a part of our culture? One more thing for you. You've seen these phone ads, right? Now, of course you have. Almost every time you see a phone ad, they will usually discuss why their camera is superior to their competition. They will discuss how much their camera can zoom further than their competition. They will discuss how quickly their camera can focus than their competition. The camera is a way of selling their products now. And the reason why is because those companies believe that a camera phone is essential in today's society. This was Kellen Ferguson, your host for Media in the Making, who brought some of you to memory lane, while to others, a place where smartphones never existed. Media in the Making is brought to you by WJHS 91.5 and the Eagle Tech Academy Media Classes. Media in the Making, teaching you about the evolution of media throughout history and its effects on culture. For more from the students, more podcasting series are on the 91.5 website, WJHS915.org. Thank you for joining us.